Hey everybody, Seth Campbell here with the new Segue Says podcast. This week we've got two classic throwbacks that were big hits, one from the Beatles, one from Bruce Hornsby. Two artists who I love and to a certain degree I think are really underrepresented in these videos. I'm not entirely sure why. But we have a great chance to combine them today. So, the Beatles song is Ticket to Ride, and the Bruce Hornsby song is called Walk in the Sun. So, these are both songs that kind of musically have a moderately upbeat feel. They sound like happy songs. One of them is marginally happy, the other really isn't, but that's what music can do for you. Sometimes the atmosphere of the song doesn't necessarily agree with the lyrics, or it doesn't disagree, but it's not what you'd at first imagine. And the Beatles did that a lot with songs that are actually at times very sad and depressing and at times somewhat frightening, but that still sound somewhat upbeat just because of the music. Ticket to Ride is one of those to a certain degree. Both these songs are in A major at almost exactly the same tempo. This is Ticket to Ride. It is, and somewhere there's a great book called A Hard Day's Write, W-R-I-T-E, Write, that tells the history behind every single Beatles song, or at least every single original Beatles song, and it's a phenomenal book. Any Beatles fan, I hugely recommend you get this. But somewhere in there it talks about how long it actually took the Beatles to write a song that isn't directly about love, and it's about 6 or 7 albums, I believe. But this is one of their sad love songs, of which there are many, many, many sad love songs. I think I'm gonna be sad, I think it's today, yeah. The girl that's driving me mad is going away. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She don't care. Then there's the next verse, and it's a pretty much a verse refrain with a longer refrain. I wouldn't call that a chorus, that She's Got a Ticket to Ride portion. But as you can hear, it's a sad love song about a man in love with a woman who's leaving, and as the verses progress, you learn that they were in a relationship and it's kind of gone south. So, that's Ticket to Ride. Walk in the Sun is another song about a complicated relationship, shall we say. This is what I love about Bruce Hornsby. Is what I just mentioned about the Beatles. There are very few songs, with the exception of the drug-infused, surrealism like Yellow Submarine, I Am the Walrus, etc. There are very few Beatles songs about things you can't find tons of other songs, because they're mostly love songs. Bruce Hornsby has songs that tell stories that are unlike any other songwriter I've heard, and Walk in the Sun is a great example. It was the hit single off the Hot House album of the early 90s, and it's a song sung by a character, a guy by the name of Vernon James, as you'll hear in the verse, who is a ticket taker. He runs a cash register and the ticket counter at a strip club, and his girlfriend happens to be one of the performers at this club. And so, of course, he talks about, giving tickets to all the other men who are going to come in and watch his girlfriend perform, and how, of course, that's awkward, but how he's willing to stick it out until they've both made enough money to move on from this crazy world that they're both living in. So this is a verse chorus of Walk in the Sun. One day we'll walk in the sun. My name is Vernon James and I live to the south of town. Sit by the window watching the women go round and round. Some people come here for love, some people come for fantasy. But when 2 in the morning comes around, my baby comes around for me. Someone come, my someone, take the clouds from my eyes, my one. I know that sometime soon, one day we'll walk in the sun. It's a great song. I definitely recommend checking it out and reading the lyrics, because as I said, they're very original. It's a great story, and Bruce does a phenomenal job of telling it. Now, as you can hear, as I mentioned already, these songs both in A major, both have the same tempo, and both of them make good use out of this note, which is a B. So in the key of A, that we call it this. The 2 is a scale degree, or in a chord, we call it a 9. Long story there for you non-musicians. Don't worry about it. I'll try to explain some other time if you're interested. But both of them have riffs that make very good use of this, and it's this note that you almost have a sus2 chord a lot of the time, that it contributes to the sort of the upbeat, happy feeling of these songs, even if the lyrics don't always seem to agree. The Ticket to Ride riff is done by the guitars. That's how it starts. And again, this note, the B, very prominently placed. And in Walk in the Sun, the riff is a piano lead. And again, this note right here. In fact, the riff rests on this note. So again, there you have another common element, and it's these little things that really help tie songs together, and how these segues often, come into my mind, or indeed other people's minds, is you take points of similarity and you work with that. So, I like to start this with Ticket to Ride. Now, I know what I've talked about before about starting with the less recognizable song first, and Ticket to Ride. I mean, Walk in the Sun was a hit. It was a charting hit. But, you take the average person off the street and say, are you more familiar with the Beatles or Bruce Hornsby? They're probably going to say the Beatles. So, in theory, the set list psychology that I've talked about would tell you to start with Walk in the Sun. But for some reason, Ticket to Ride flows better first, in my personal opinion. But I'm going to show you how to do it both ways. So feel free to take this any way you want. You go through Ticket to Ride, and you have the last, my baby don't care, my baby don't care, my baby don't care. And throughout the vocal outro, you're still playing this riff. When you want to switch to Walk in the Sun, it's very easy to just go from one riff right to the other. Walk in the sun. Our name is Vernon James, and I live to the south of town. In some ways, Walk in the Sun feels a little more relaxed, at least to my mind, than Ticket to Ride does. And so maybe that's why the segue works, because a lot of times, with a couple exceptions that I don't know if I'll end up demonstrating here because they involve a couple songs that are pretty much impossible to find these days, but you probably wouldn't do a back and forth segue in particular, starting calm, going much heavier and much more intense, and then back to the calmer one. So for that reason, I guess, it is why I like to do it this way. Now, Walk in the Sun fades out originally on the record, and live Bruce occasionally does an outro, an intro outro that's very staccato based, but I like to end it just with the main riff. When I play it on its own, this is. That's how I usually end it. Now, if you wanted to go into Ticket to Ride from there, you just wouldn't slow it down at the end, and once again, you just switch riffs, quite simply. Now when I do this as a segue, I like to just end it with just that little bit of Ticket to Ride at the end, because I've already played it in the beginning. We've done Walk in the Sun, and Walk in the Sun, as I say, is a great story, so you don't want to put that back out of people's heads, but it's a fun little tease just to do this for a few bars. Now, of course, if you started with Walk in the Sun, and you go into the Ticket to Ride riff, you just start singing Ticket to Ride right there. Very simple. If you want to do Ticket to Ride first, go into Walk in the Sun, and then have some vocal portions of Ticket to Ride after Walk in the Sun. If you really wanted to reestablish Ticket to Ride, you would probably, I'd advise starting with the Ticket to Ride bridge, the B section. I don't know why she's riding so high. Should think twice, should do right by me before she gets to say goodbye. Because it starts on this D chord, and if you started with a verse, then you pretty much have to go verse, B section, verse. But with this, you could just do a B section, verse, out. And it's short and sweet, gets the point across. So that, if you were to do that, you in the sun. Don't know why she's riding so high. Shoulda think twice, shoulda do right by me. If a lot of times segueing back into verse-refrain songs that have a bridge, the bridge is where you'd start the return. At least if you're including the vocals, as I did in that example there. So once again, you have a number of options with this, however you'd like to do it. But this segue has a fond place in my heart because it has a very specific memory of when I came up with it. It was when I was still playing at the Clover Food Lab, as a matter of fact, and there was one that I remember, it was going fairly slowly, not a lot of people were there, and those who were there didn't seem very interested in the music, but towards the end of the night, a couple of very nice young women came up to the second floor, which where I was playing, and they decided to pick the table next to where I had my piano set up, and so they were listening and applauding and being very kind and enjoying the music. I believe their names were Natalie and Dante, if I remember correctly. If you're watching this, thank you very much, ladies. You really made my night that night. And I asked if they had any requests, and they said, well, do you know the Beatles' Ticket to Ride? And I said I did. So as I was playing it, I was just kind of extending the outro. And I believe I was trying to improvise to a certain degree, just with instrumental piano and some small melodies. And I believe I ended up just coming to rest the main riff on this B, at which point everything kind of clicked in my head. It's like, wait, Walk in the Sun also rests a riff on a B. It's also in A, and it's also at this tempo. So at that point, I was improvising, and I did what I just showed you. I just started playing Walk in the Sun. So I played Walk in the Sun, and then went back into a portion of Ticket to Ride at the end. And they enjoyed it a lot, and it's really cool how you transitioned between songs like that. And I said, well, it's kind of a hobby of mine. I go to Berkeley, they call me Segue, because I can, go from one song into another without stopping. I find ways to do that. And one of the many unique features about the Clover, and I'm not entirely sure if it's still doing this because I haven't been back there since I stopped playing, but is that they had lots of very large blank paper and crayons everywhere. I guess so kids, or basically anyone who wants to, could draw, and you could hang your drawings up on the wall if you wanted. They'd be there for a few days. Well, they had been making a large collage of various words, drawings, phrases throughout the entire time they were there, and I didn't see it until they were ready to leave. But the big center phrase, the biggest words in the middle were "They call me Segue." Of course, they spelled Segway Segway, like the motor scooter thing. But I can forgive. And I just remember being so touched by that because wow, they enjoyed the music, they thought it was cool, and they listened to what I said. And I wish I had asked the Clover, because they had left by the time I was done finishing, because they hung it up on the wall, the Clover. I wish I'd asked the Clover if I could take it with me, but I failed to do so, and by the time I was there next week, it was gone, most likely recycled, to make room for more. I did have a couple of pictures of it, though, and for a short amount of time, it was my Facebook cover photo, just this big banner full of colorful words and drawings, everyone in the middle. They call me Segue, which I thought was really fun. So, to me, playing those songs in that Segue in particular brings back a very fond memory of my days at the Clover Food Lab. And so, thanks again to those two young ladies, if they happen to be watching. And if you know who they are, if you're watching and you know who they are, pass along my thanks, because it really did make my night, as I said, because it had been a slow night and not many people were paying attention before that, and I wasn't feeling too great about it, but it's always nice when people enjoy something. So speaking of which, hopefully you've enjoyed this. I will see you next week.